Today we return to SRD Talk while taking a look at a SRD/game that came out a while ago, but is interesting because it describes itself as crunchy for a reason. So let's take a look at exactly how crunchy it is and what kind of approach they took when they created this. Thank you all for joining us again here today on Hudson's County for another SRD Talk. In this video series, we take a look at standard reference documents and other materials that you can potentially use and reference in order to create some of your own games. Today, we're going to be taking a look at the ORC, which is the Organic Rule Components System. This was created by the creators at Vajira Enterprises. Vajira Enterprises was sort of like a little TTRPG studio. In 2001, 2002, I think is when they started making some of their first stuff and went all the way to, I think it was around 2022, 2023, when they did their last sort of Kickstarter thing, when they created the End Times, which was their last game. It seems to me like they've kind of dissolved at this stage. But what we're talking about is the Organic Rules Components system that they utilized for pretty much all of their games, based on the versions that were released in 2006. So again, kind of jumping into what exactly is this. The ORC, again, as I mentioned, was created by Vajira Enterprises. The SRD sort of we're going to be utilizing is, there are two versions of it. There's like a vanilla ORC, which is just basically the basic rules that you can't really use to run a game, but it's an essential basic rule set to describe how the system works for those of you who are creators who might want to make your own game based on it. They also released a side component to that called Modern ORC. It has elements in it so that you could use it to run like a game set in modern day. Pretty much all of the rules as described in Vanilla ORC and Modern ORC are available for your use as a creator under the Creative Commons Attributions 3.0 unported license. So this is sort of like the older version or an older version of Creative Commons. Again, as I mentioned, it self-describes as crunchy for a reason. One reason for this is most of Vajira games use settings that diverge from the standard tropes. So, for example, they have Tibet, the role-playing game. It is actually set in 1939 Tibet. During the communist Chinese takeover of the country of Tibet. Inside of it, it has a relatively unique magic system that is very strongly built around the local version of Buddhism and a traditional Tibetan shamanism and some other elements like that. So it's a very unique magic system for those of us who are used to more, your Western style trope magic. That you would see, like, for example, in D&D or some other game like that. The rule system also is crunchy with the intention of trying to create ultra-realistic roleplay. This is, the creator described this as trying to avoid the mechanics getting in the way of real-life problem solving. It provides those skills and things for situations where, because of the disconnect in the cultural and historical and other disconnect between you, the player, versus the character, those skills are there to help you bridge that gap and figure out, okay, I don't know how I would solve this problem, but it's realistic to assume that my character would know how to solve this problem, just because I don't have the personal experience to be aware of ways that this problem could be solved. So, what are the mechanics of ORC? Well, quite simply, the basics are built around a D20 system with attributes and a tiered skill system. This will sound very familiar to most people. If you are doing a basic roll on pretty much any situation where it's just you versus the environment, you're going to be adding together whatever your attribute score is plus your skill, should you have one, and then you're going to add that to a D20 roll, and that is against a target number. The range of difficulties will generally run between anywhere from 5 up to like 40, but like the actual typical range that you would be getting in would be like really easy rolls would probably be around a 10. Very difficult actions will probably be around a 30, with obviously average being in 20. Again, this is basically your kind of standard D&D difficulty target number range, but upgraded because you're not doing attribute bonuses, you're just doing straight attributes. Contested roles are actually a little different in this system, where each of the players will be doing a standard roll against a target number that is set based on how difficult the particular thing that they're doing as a part of this contested roll would be. And then once you have figured out how high above the target number you've rolled, you actually compare that result against each other. So, for example, if our player 1 had a difficulty 25 roll and they rolled a 27, so they are 2 over. And player 2 only has a difficulty 15 roll because whatever they're doing is actually easier, and they roll, let's say, again a 20. They're 5 over, so the player 2 would be the person who actually succeeds in that contested roll. I don't remember reading anything specific about like what do you do if both players fail. I mean, presumably if one of the players succeeds and the other player fails, and whoever succeeded would succeed in the task itself. But yeah, it wasn't necessarily clear what should happen if both players fail. My guess is just that things go very badly for everybody. But anyway, just wanted to clarify that point. As I mentioned, this system, of course, is very key in that it has both attributes and skills. Attributes tier in value from 1 to 20, with 10 being average and 20 being like the maximum that a human being could potentially achieve without some sort of outside augmentation of some sort, somehow metaphysical or like some sort of cyber enhancement or something like that. The characters have base attributes and health attributes. Health attributes actually have slightly different rules. Basically, these are your hit points, and there are 3 different kinds of hit points. Basically, you have your body hit points, which are basically like, oh, I'm getting beat up, that kind of a thing. They have blood hit points. Taking injuries to this is actually like potentially life-threatening. And then once you lose all of your blood hit points and you hit incapacity hit points, the incapacity hit points are basically like the hit points that say, okay, you are dying, right? You are literally dying. How long can you continue to survive despite the fact that you're dying and still do stuff is essentially how incapacity works. And then, of course, you've got your base attributes. Those are agility, which in many ways is how like most games would describe dexterity. You have awareness, which is like your physical awareness of what's going on around you and stuff like that. Charm, which, as you can probably imagine, is your personability, your ability to communicate well with people and interact well and be likable and stuff like that. Endurance, which is the physical elements of constitution. Intelligence, which operates pretty similarly to most other systems. Speed, which describes, yes, how fast you can move, but also like actually how strong your legs are. So, for example, if I am doing unarmed combat and I actually kick somebody, then my speed points, the number of points I have in speed, actually determines how much damage my kick does to the other person or the other character. Strength, which is, again, your traditional strength, but primarily focused actually on upper body strength as opposed to lower body strength. And then willpower, which, of course, is like the actual like mental and ability to handle pain and avoid psychological manipulation. Some of these can have sub-attributes if you want that would actually like give you a special bonus or hindrance whenever you're dealing with a particular aspect of one of these. So an example that's actually cited in the manual is maybe your character's not that strong, but they have like a really strong grip strength. So they have a low strength because their arms aren't that strong, but like for some reason their hands are just incredibly they have incredibly strong fingers. So they would basically gain like, let's say, a +3 bonus to whenever they're like gripping something or doing some sort of measurement or check based on that, as opposed to just raw strength. All PCs start out with 100 points in skills when they are created. The cost of each skill is actually determined by class, and these skills are collected by type. There's a big, giant, long list. Let's say I take a skill class that is primarily focused on combat. If I purchase a level in a combat skill, then that will cost less. fewer points than if I, let's say, was buying a skill in combat, if I was just like a student in college or something like that. Somebody who clearly would not be learning combat skills as a part of my, let's say, class or job or whatever. Each of these skills tier in value from 1 to 6. Basically, every level after 1 adds a +4 bonus to any checks that you might be doing that utilize that skill. So if I have a skill level of 4, that means I add a bonus of 12 to my roll. When you are creating a character, the highest you can go is 5. 6 is something that you would be adding later. However, it's also important to note that most of the time you probably aren't, when you're originally creating your character, you're not going to have a skill level like probably above 3, maybe a level of 4 too, just because of how many points you're going to be spending into these skills in order to get them. So the only reason why you'd probably have a character with a skill at 5 or maybe even 4 when you're originally creating them is just because like you are super duper specialized. So classes, whenever you take a look at the modern orc version of the manual, it actually calls these day jobs because that's literally what they are. I mean, they're talking like student, boring desk job, those kinds of things. Anyway, each of these classes, whenever you're creating them for the orc system, should have like a description of what it is, and then some suggestions on like ways that you could potentially play this character, stuff like that, recommended equipment and things like that. There's generally a list of costs that in order to add new skills or advance the levels of a skill. And also it gives you your starting funds and your weekly income. It is optional. But some things that also will be included with classes would be special equipment, skills that you get for free, any advantages or drawbacks that this particular class might give a person, and advancements that this class has access to, basically ways that you could potentially tier up this particular class. So just to take a look at some examples, again, these are from the modern orc version. This is an example of a day job. This is the security professional. You can see there it costs 4 bonus points. We'll talk about bonus points in a minute, but basically this is to try to help balance the initial sort of creation of a character. So again, we have a description, income. Our character gives us some perks. We also have drawbacks. So as you can see there, like, this PC is often forced to work at inconvenient hours, like the graveyard or swing shifts. So there might be times where we would like to be able to be doing something that's like a background adventure that's going on with our group, but we can't because we have to work. And then there are some advancements there that we could buy at the beginning with our bonus points, or we could buy with experience points later on. And basically, as you can see there, these are basically just upgrading in the job, which gives us more money and access to different perks and stuff like that. We get a set of free skills. And then at the very bottom there, you've got your list of skill costs. So, and again, just to run through them real quick, we have, at least in this version of the game, we have academic skills, athletic skills, combat skills, creative skills, criminal skills, tech skills, investigation or espionage skills, that's in INVS, labor skills, medical skills, people skills, and traditional skills. So if I were to create a security professional character and I wanted to get a new combat skill, so let's say I want my character to be able to utilize firearms, let's say. So presumably in order to buy a skill in using guns, I would need to go in and, to say pistols, I would need to go in and spend 9 of those 100 skill points that I get at the beginning of the creation system, character creation system, in order to buy 1 level in that item. But if I wanted to, let's say, instead get carpentry, then I would spend 5 points because that's under labor, and so on and so forth. Or if I had a skill and I wanted to upgrade it, again, I'd be paying the same cost in the skill. And one thing that's important to note is that obviously these numbers adjust or change depending upon the particular class that we're talking about, because obviously some classes are going to be more likely to develop certain skills while doing the job, or it's expected that they'll even have these skills as a part of their job, as opposed to other ones. So that's why, for example, criminals 15 here, because generally it's expected that if you're acting as security while you might have some awareness of like criminal activity and stuff like that, you obviously your skill or experience with dealing with crime and stuff like that is going to be less than if, like, let's say you were a police officer or an actual criminal. Here's another example where we're taking a look at a reporter. And this is all pretty standard. Again, we have advancements where we can be like a senior reporter, special correspondent, and earn extra recognition or even become an editor. We do get a bunch of free skills. So you can see there we have research into law enforcement too, and either writing or photography too, presumably whether we focus on, being a photojournalist or an actual like written journalist or stuff like that. And you'll notice that, again, the skill lists there at the bottom is somewhat different. So combat here is 15, while previously it was like 12. Criminal here is 12 as well. With the previous one, it was 15. We have like, lower costs for buying academic skills here and people skills here, presumably because, obviously we need to deal with people and also academic research. Now, what are bonus points? Well, bonus points are used to purchase bonus characteristics. So these bonus points can be used to purchase advantages. And so there are a big long list of different things that you can add. You can also use bonus points to add or subtract from that 100 points of skills that you get, or the starting points that you get to spend in attributes, or increase or decrease the amount of money that you're starting with. You can also get bonus points by taking disadvantages. So for those of you who are seeing this, having to balance your advantages and disadvantages, this is very similar to the way that character creation in not the most recent version of Legends of Five Rings, but the one just before that. You have to balance your advantages and your disadvantages when you're creating your character. And you can only have a maximum of 30 bonus points spent into disadvantages at the creation of your character. Bonus points can also be gained or required to be spent in order to get certain classes or day jobs. As you just saw, both of the jobs that we were looking at had a required that you spend some bonus points in order to be able to take them. Other ones will actually give you extra bonus points to put towards bonus characteristics. So, for example, if you picked a class as being homeless, you actually get 8 bonus points because of the in-story disadvantages that you will undoubtedly be facing. Finally, again, just to clarify, but these bonus points and these bonus points that you would be spending on bonus characteristics or potentially boosting your character's starting skills and attributes and starting money only apply to try to make character creation balanced. It doesn't, however, keep them balanced. Bonus points do not apply to anything after character creation. If you have something happen during story and it might potentially cause your advantage to go away because your advantage was you had a contact and your contact dies, or your criminal contact gets arrested and now they're in jail. And the same thing, of course, goes with disadvantages. Disadvantages could potentially go away over time, or you could end up accumulating new ones. You don't get special stuff just because that happens. It's just the way the story goes. And that's just kind of it adds an element to the realism here. And then that bad things can happen even to characters who are really powerful and important. That being said, of course, there are ways that we can advance a character. So, of course, your character gains experience points. And these experience points can be gained from accomplishing certain goals, working well together, good role play, those kinds of things. A lot of the typical stuff that you would expect to see people gaining experience points for, based on, especially a system that uses primarily milestones, or that kind of thing. Making achievements as opposed to gaining experience points just by combat, like you would see in D&D, essentially. The number of experience points you're usually gaining for accomplishing one of these things is usually between I think it's 5 and 15 points if I remember correctly. However, ORC also has a system in it where you can actually lose experience points. If you badly fail a goal, if one of your PCs dies, if the group ends up splitting up and that causes serious problems, if you actually make the world a worse place and not a better place, those are different instances where you would actually be losing experience points. Everything I've read so far suggests that the most experience points you really should be losing would be about 5 points max. So it's not a huge amount, But it is interesting that this system actually does have essentially where it's not really a karma system, but where the essentially like we're doing badly, not like doing bad things, but doing badly could actually result in losing experience. These experience points, of course, can be used to buy stuff. For example, it only costs 2 experience points to upgrade skills. It costs 10 experience points in order to upgrade an attribute by 1 level up to the maximum. And health attributes, because there are generally fewer of them, the max you can have is 6 in each of your health attributes. Those actually cost 30 experience points to upgrade by 1 level. Bonus characteristics are gained through gameplay. They are not purchased with experience points. So if you want to get rid of a bonus characteristic that's like a disadvantage or gain a new one, or even potentially move into a new class, you notice that the upgrades for classes, advancements in classes could cost experience points, but if you wanted to like completely change that, those are all things that are done through gameplay and role play, not being just straight up bought by experience points. It does note in the manual that basically characters can spend experience points anytime they want, but it does recommend that you limit certain situations where an upgrade doesn't necessarily make sense based on the actual like plot of the story as of that moment. So, for example, if your characters are hiding out on the run, it probably doesn't make sense for them to be increasing academic skills, or unless for some reason they have with them, or the place where they're hiding out actually has access to those particular types of resources that you would need in order to study an academic skill. When could you use ORC? What could you use it for? ORC would be very useful for creating role-playing in a world where the society rules or basic structures of the game, basic structures of like the world itself, would be very foreign to the players. Because again, just as they described at the beginning, it's crunchy for a reason. Basically, it's giving you stronger guide rails to run the story on, because you don't have those already existing native guide rails, just because the world you're playing in is already familiar to you because it basically is the real world, or because it is a fictional world that you are very familiar with. Like, I would not bother using this to try playing a very stereotypical fantasy game. Like, I wouldn't use this to make a D&D clone or something like that. Why? Because most people who are playing a game like D&D are already very familiar with a lot of the tropes and stuff, so you don't really need these hardcore, or these, not hardcore, but hard, crunchy, structured rules in order to sort of set the guidelines. However, that being said, if the game I'm playing in has a lot of twists and turns away from those tropes, this would be very useful. Another game where this system would be very useful for would be a game where everyday survival is just as important and exciting for the story as the actual like missions that you're going on and stuff. This is not a good system for a game where you just like pick up and go. So it's not good for quick starts. It's also not good for groups that don't like to regularly reference the manual. There is a giant list of skills and a giant list of things that they could all apply to, and a giant list of equipment, a lot of descriptions of that equipment, that you can't just sort of hand wave things in this game, unfortunately. So this is not a good system for any group that doesn't like necessarily regularly referencing the rules and tapping into those rules on a regular basis. Hand wavy stuff, it's just not going to work. It's also, I personally feel, for a game that's supposed to be based on realism, it feels kind of strange to me to use the very swingy D20. Honestly, if I were using this to create a game, I would seriously consider changing the dice structure. The rest of it, the basic idea of the rest of it, it seems like that would actually work really well if you're trying to create, if maybe a little over crunchy, if you're trying to create a world again where your characters are not familiar with the basic structure of how things work, and so they need those extra guide rails to help them figure out what your characters should look like, what they should be doing, and how they survive in the world. But I would probably, at the very least, change the dice system. At the very least, swapping out your D20 for maybe 2D12s or something, 3D6, something along those lines, which would, of course, require changing like the target number pool, but that wouldn't be that big of a deal. I feel it wouldn't be that hard to balance that because there's lots of games. Again, this was created in 2006. There's lots of games that have come out since then that primarily rely on using D6s, D10s, or D12s instead of this, that it wouldn't be that hard to find something that would work as an adjustment for the difficulty ranges. So thank you all for joining us for this look at ORC. This is, again, just to remind you all, this was the ORC system from Vegeta Enterprises. A link to the post on their website that actually has links to modern ORC and the sort of fantasy or the sort of generic ORC PDFs will be in the description down below. I do not think that they put up modern ORC or this on any like traditional gaming sharing websites. So for example, it's not on itch and it's not on Drive-Thru-RPG, but they do have, Vegeta Enterprises other games, like the past games that they've created based on this system are at least on Drive-Thru-RPG, if not in other places. So thank you all for joining us again here today. Remember to, of course, like if you liked this, comment, please, if you want to share more of your own thoughts about this system, and of course, subscribe if you want to catch other games in the SRD Talk series, or, of course, check out other videos on the channel. Have a good zone, and don't forget to rate your id purchases.